Okay. Okay, I didn't. First of all, I wanted to say it's really, really nice to see everybody. I haven't been taking part of these meetings for such a long time because I've been extremely busy. I roll out of bed in the morning, I wear my robe for a couple hours, and I work in front of the computer doing all kinds of stuff, either related to High Notes Avante or languages or teaching. So my apologies for not having been part of this for a long time, but I really noticed that I had missed out on a lot of intelligence and wonderful ideas from varied sources. And you said so many beautiful things about music, and I don't think anybody said anything that I wouldn't agree with. I was going to tell you a little bit about myself and what I feel about classical music too. I was hoping you would ask me that question earlier so that I could have a moment to breathe before I start talking about High Notes Avante, but it's kind of rolls into each other. So I'm just going to keep on going until I get dry in my throat, I guess. So I grew up in a family of 6, and I guess my mom came from a farmer's background and really wanted her kids. She was one of the first people to get to university from her little village in northern Denmark. And my dad is from, I don't have any of them anymore. My dad was from a Christian family where their father was a reverend. He actually christened me, although I'm not Christian particularly. So quite varied background, and they had music in different ways. My dad was taught how to play piano a little bit. I didn't know one song, and my mom got the opportunity to play, and she wanted us to have the opportunity too. So we did. I remember listening to TV concerts, listening to Itzhak Perlman, amongst other violinists, and it really moved me. So I also played violin, which also brought me to the viola and the piano. Dreamt about possibly becoming a concert pianist, but you have to be quite good. Not just quite good, you have to be absolutely amazing. Another part of music in my life as a child, I guess, was my best friend at some points when, from being from a large family, maybe slightly different, they would maybe pick on me a little bit in school. So I always found solace and support in the piano, right? You could express how you felt. You could play music by somebody from hundreds of years ago that might have felt something similar or had a similar feeling, but it might not have been the same feeling you were going through. And also it was really helpful to study, to have that in the background. I also love to write, and it was great to listen to while doing that. I wasn't actually exposed to anything really except classical music until I came to Canada at age 18. Maybe a little bit of Beatles, a little bit of Rod Stewart, and ABBA. You can really avoid ABBA living in Sweden. And I love that music just as much as I love classical music. I love Michael Jackson. I love anything that's good music. And I think that if you really want to redefine the meaning of classical music, it is not from a certain era. It's more the kind of music that will live on into the future beyond its own era. So there's music being created today that will be listened to generations way into the future beyond us. Okay, so I think that more or less answered my question about music, classical music. Like a lot of you guys, I think somebody in your life might have had an issue of mental health in the past. Oh, I was going to say that too, by the way, about the composers and music and having mental health issues. They may not necessarily have had any more mental health issues than anybody else, but they may have had the ability and the means to express it. So they use that to write it down in music. So I think music making is one of the best gifts you can give anybody, because it's another way to put into a language that is understood by people all over the world how you're feeling. And it's a kind of therapy. Nowadays, therapy can be I would say music can be prescribed right next to medicine in certain areas of the world. It's already done. I think in London, and I think in Quebec, they say, go watch an art show, go to the theater, listen to music. It actually can really help you, as many of you pointed out, with people with Alzheimer's too. Anyway, High Notes Avante came about a little less than 10 years ago. Somebody in my family had a hard time, and during one of those really hard nights, it's like, I bet we're not the only ones. And I remembered people in my past life, my father, my uncles, a sister, my brother, who also had mental health issues, but they moved on and they did really well despite that. So telling those stories to the person that was going through it at that time really helped. And during one of the really, really difficult nights that we were having, we both agreed that something good had to come out of this. We would have to try to make it easier for others in the future. And I guess that's really where the little tiny light that became High Notes Avante was lit. So we have a background. I teach piano. I studied corporate communications. I worked a little bit as an editor before my children were born. I really appreciate the power of both words and music. So had to put on a few recitals for my students. Thought it would be kind of fun to put on a show. And at the same time, this is kind of before Bell Let's Talk was really, really big too. So there was still a lot more stigma than there is right now around. So I thought maybe I would just look at a sheet here and tell you about the history. So that, let's see, where did it go, my history? The very first concert was put on in May of 2014. And that was just me as an independent person hoping to raise some money for the Canadian Mental Health Association. We did not raise any money, but we didn't lose any money either. But we did get a lot of positive comments from people that said, thank you for doing this. You know, I feel less lonely now. And it's great that you're doing this. So then we thought, well, maybe we won't raise money for the Canadian Mental Health Association, but we will continue to try to raise the image of mental illness the way others had raised the image of AIDS and maybe SARS and collected money, although we were not going to do that in the past. So like Live Aid is an example where music was really powerful in bringing attention to social issues like what's going on. So we did that. We were incorporated as a not-for-profit in 2014 with basically the mission to create compassion and understanding, respect, and connections through arts for everyone that has been touched by mental illness. So then between 2015 and 2017, we put on several galas, including, I guess, the infamous half gala at the Richmond Hill Center, where there was a fire. And I always say, perhaps our messages were so hot that, you know, the people could just not handle more than half of that information and that show we were putting on. Yeah, various little things happened. We tried for grants. Sometimes we got some small grants. So we had a series of socials in Richmond Hill and Markham. Joanne and I performed together once, and we had, we had some other small gatherings because people with mental health issues really need connections with others. And we were trying to come out of the huge, intimidating concert hall as well to bring people together where they could talk to each other. Because our idea is also that when you share stories, you can learn from each other and you feel less lonely. And, you know, the more you talk about something, the less scary it becomes and you get hope. It's about creating hope. So let's see here. We also got our registered charitable status a couple of years later. So it moved pretty quickly to be tiny little thing, like a little light that was lit in the middle of the night. We got a charitable status in 2018, which means that if somebody donates money to us, we can now give a registered charitable receipt back. It also meant that we had to incorporate official objectives that had to be approved under the Charitable Act. And that was a bit of a challenge to come up with something. And they actually fed us the objectives, which I will read to you because they're quite dry. Cannot remember them. It says to relieve conditions associated with mental illness by offering art productions directed towards the alleviation of loneliness and isolation, as well as to reduce the associated stigma. That's one of our objectives. And the other one is then to promote mental health by providing information from mental health professionals and testimonials from artists, well-known personalities, and others who suffer or have suffered from mental illness. I say basically we're trying to raise the image of mental illness. So yeah, we continued to do what we were doing, using music, try to get different celebrities. Sometimes we were chasing them in the theater. I remember with Sherry, we were running after Dan Hill and we got him to perform. And he also said some really nice things about us, that something about our compassion and empathy towards those with mental illness is unsurpassed, which was really nice. So although I was never, I never became a concert pianist, I got to hang around with a lot of these people and see how their lives is. And really, they're just regular people and very nice and down to earth. But many do suffer. We were supposed to have an event in April, the year COVID started. Now I say the year because it seems like it's so many years ago, but it's only a year and a half ago. And we had to cancel that one. And we tried several times to move it to different times. And we're finally doing it now in November. I'm going to tell you why in a little bit. But before I get there, I also want to say that due to we were trying to get all this funding, once in a while we got some success. And luckily that summer we did get a small grant from the Trillium Foundation. And it was good timing because although we could not do in-person events, it allowed us to do virtual events. So we started, we had already started an in-person choir, but that moved online. So although it seems really strange to be singing together with somebody online, it was done. And we also created a book club where we discuss books about fictional books, because it's like more artistic than a biography in my humble opinion, that have some kind of element where somebody's been touched by mental illness, and then that opens up to discussions in the group of personal experiences. Or even if it doesn't, they know they're in a safe place, they are talking with others who also have been touched by mental illness, so there's no expectation of perfection when we're discussing. In similar ways, we also started a movie club. So if nobody likes to go to concerts or sing, if they don't like reading, they can just talk about movies they've seen and how those movies may have changed their mood, which is what we need to do. We need to give people the mood of hope that there's something to live for, right? Let's see. Right, so this summer, I think was probably almost unreal when I opened up an email where we had applied for a grant from the Canada Council for the Arts. Now, we're not talking Richmond Hill, we're not talking York region, we're not talking Ontario, we're talking all of Canada. We, as High Notes Avante, got the stamp of approval from the Canada Council for the Arts to, oh, thank you, Shay, to produce a similar concert to what we did in the beginning of this year in January, when everything was shut down. We did produce a concert that we called the Concert of Hope, a digital version of the live events that we do. Again, there are some people here, they like classical music. There's some people who like other kinds of music. You like it as background. You like it for a lot of different reasons. So we just want to show people what can be done despite being affected by mental illness. So these performances are short and also would appeal to almost anybody in their entirety. So there might be somebody playing a piece of classical music. There might be a dancer. There might be a singer. There might be somebody who's 17 years old. There might be somebody who's 70 years old. But there's something for everybody in that concert. So this concert on November 18th, that is in person, we're actually also going to film segments of that, so that for those of you who still are afraid to be out in public, and even if the theater is going to be pretty much empty, because a lot of people are still afraid to be out in public, you will have an opportunity to view it later for a second concert of hope that we will announce once we have decided on the date for that. That's what the Canada Council grant is for, to do another digital concert. So that's why we jumped and booked the theater now in November, just thinking that it's a really, really beautiful way also to give back to the musicians who have been away for such a long time. They're dying to perform. They feed off the energy that you get when you have an audience. It's surprising, but if you don't have anybody listening to you, you don't really feel the motivation of producing always. Everybody's different, but that's at least one version of what the artists are thinking. What was I going to say? So we are doing this in November, and if you wanted a quick rundown of the performers, maybe there's a 17-year-old singer and songwriter who will sing. We have a dancer who's performing to throat singing. The throat singing is also like vibrations and changing your mood and so that should be really interesting. We have a cellist and a pianist. They're part of the Amici Chamber Ensemble, but also the cellist is the former principal of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. They're performing music by Robert Schumann, who did have mental health issues in his life. We have singer who is an opera singer but is performing both an opera aria as well as musical short song. There's actually a violinist who's going to be premiering a composition that was made just for us by a living classical composer. His name is Frank Horvath, and that composition is called To Cope and to Manage. And it's very interesting because he whipped it up in like a day. The conversations were going back and forth between the violinist and him. How long should it be? Are you going to have piano with it or not? And once that was decided, the composition landed in my inbox like the day after. So I don't know how they do it, but good for them. I could tell you a lot more, but I think I'm going to stop and then maybe open up for questions instead, in case somebody has questions for me.